I was in the middle of fixing a busted water heater when my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. Clients don't like it when you check your phone while standing in a flood of their own making. But when it buzzed again, and then again, I wiped my hands on my jeans and pulled it out. Helen, hey, honey, can you call me when you get a sec? That should have been my first red flag. My mother never calls just to chat. Whenever she reaches out, it's either because someone in the family needs money or because there's a delicate situation that I, being the reasonable one, need to handle. Still, I finished the job before calling her back, wiping the sweat from my face as I stepped into my truck. Hey, Helen, what's up? I asked, already bracing myself. Sweetheart, listen, about Christmas this year. She started, her voice slow and careful, like she was talking to a wild animal that might bolt at any second. I frowned. What about it? A long pause. We think it might be best if you sit this one out. I blinked. What? It's just… Well, Sophie has been working so hard in law school, and her boyfriend James is coming this year, and you know how important his family is in the legal world. I sat up straighter. Okay, and… She hesitated. We want to make sure everything is comfortable for everyone. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Are you saying I'd make people uncomfortable? Helen exhaled, like this conversation was exhausting for her. Sweetheart, it's not personal. It's just that James's family is, well, very professional. And Sophie is trying to make a good impression. And what does that have to do with me? She was quiet for a second. Then, honey, you're a plumber. Dead silence. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white and said through gritted teeth, You know how these things are. Helen continued quickly, like she was trying to smooth it over. James's father is a judge. His mother is on charity boards. These people have connections, and Sophie doesn't want to seem, well, I could practically hear her wincing. Unrefined, I finished for her. I knew you'd take it the wrong way, she said, as if I was the problem here. We just don't want anything to get in the way of Sophie's future. You understand, don't you? I let out a sharp laugh. So let me get this straight. I'm good enough to pay for Sophie's law school, but not good enough to eat Christmas dinner at the same table as her lawyer boyfriend. Laura, don't be so dramatic. There it was, my mother's signature move, dismissing my very real feelings like they were some kind of overreaction. No, you know what, Helen? I said, my voice shaking with cold fury. Go ahead, have your perfect Christmas. But if I'm too embarrassing to be part of the family, then so is my money. I hung up before she could respond. Then I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, feeling something inside me crack. I had spent the last 4 years covering Sophie's tuition, writing check after check, making sure she didn't have to stress about student loans while she built her prestigious future. And all that time, she had been ashamed of me. Not once had she invited me to her law school events. Not once had she introduced me to James. Not once had she even acknowledged me as the person funding her entire education. To her, I was just the bank account behind the scenes. I was too furious to cry, too angry to even fully process the betrayal. But I knew one thing for damn sure. Sophie was about to learn exactly what happened when you bit the hand that fed you. I didn't hear from my mother for the rest of the day, which was unusual. Normally, when I put my foot down about something, she'd send follow-up texts dripping with guilt-tripping phrases like, I just don't want the family to fall apart, or you'll regret letting something small ruin your relationship with your sister. But this time, silence. Which, in hindsight, should have been my second red flag. The next morning, I was halfway through repairing a leaking sink when my phone started buzzing again, first with texts, then with a call. I ignored it until my break, wiping my hands on a rag before checking my notifications. Tom, call your mother back now. Sophie, we need to talk. Helen, Laura, we need to have a family meeting. It's important. A family meeting? I let out a bitter laugh. They only called those when someone was about to get ambushed. Fine. Let's see what they had to say for themselves. I walked into my parents' house later that evening, still in my work jeans and a company hoodie. If they were embarrassed by my profession, I was about to shove it right in their faces. Sophie was already there, sitting on the couch next to James, who I was seeing for the first time ever. He looked up, studying me curiously, and I could already tell he hadn't been told the real reason behind this meeting. Helen and Tom sat across from them, their faces tense. "Laura," Helen started as soon as I stepped in. "Sit down. Let's talk about this rationally." I crossed my arms. "No thanks, I'll stand." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "We've all had time to calm down, and I think we should discuss a way to move forward as a family." "Oh, you mean how you uninvited me from Christmas because I wasn't professional enough?" I shot back. James frowned, looking between us. "Wait, what?" Sophie immediately stiffened. "That's not what happened," she said quickly, shooting a glare at Helen. "Oh, really?" I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the messages Helen had sent me from the family group chat. "Because I have receipts. Like this one where you literally said, 'I just don't want James's family to think we're not educated.'" James's head snapped toward Sophie. "You said that?" She swallowed. "It was taken out of context." "Oh, please," I scoffed. "You weren't worried about James's family judging you. You were the one who didn't want to be seen with me. Just admit it." Sophie's face was turning red now, but before she could answer, Tom cut in. "Laura, we're not here to fight," he said, trying to play the peacemaker. "We just think this whole situation has been blown out of proportion, and we don't want this affecting Sophie's future." "Oh, right," I said, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because Sophie's future is so important. More important than basic respect. More important than family, right?" Helen sighed, like I was the unreasonable one. "Laura, let's be practical. If Sophie lands a good job at a major law firm, it benefits all of us. We're trying to look at the bigger picture here." I stared at her, my anger ice cold. "The bigger picture," I repeated. "The only bigger picture I see is that I've spent the last 4 years funding Sophie's future, and the moment I became inconvenient, I got cut out like I was nothing." Sophie let out an exasperated groan. "God, Laura, you're acting like I personally attacked you." "It's not that deep. I was just trying to make a good impression, and I didn't think." "Exactly." I cut in. "You didn't think. You never thought about how it would feel to be excluded from my own family's Christmas. You never thought about what it would mean to accept my money while pretending I didn't exist. And you know what? That's on me." I reached into my bag, pulling out a printed document and dropping it onto the coffee table. Sophie frowned. "What's this?" "A cancellation notice," I said, "for your next tuition payment, effective immediately." Her face drained of color. "You're joking." I crossed my arms. "Nope. If I'm too blue-collar to sit at the Christmas table, then my blue-collar money is too good for your tuition." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Laura, no," Helen started. "Yes," I interrupted, because I finally realized something. Respect is a two-way street, and if I'm not good enough to be part of this family, then I'm not going to fund it. Sophie shot up from the couch. "You can't do this. I only have 1 semester left." "You promised, and you promised to treat me like family," I snapped. "Guess we both broke a promise, huh?" James, who had been watching silently until now, finally spoke. "Wait, Laura's been paying for your law school?" Sophie froze. I tilted my head. "Oh, you didn't tell him?" What a shocker. James looked between us, his jaw tightening. "Sophie, what the hell?" Sophie turned to him, panicked. "James, baby, this isn't what it looks like. Laura said she wanted to help." "Yeah, before you decided I was beneath you," I shot back. James's face darkened. "So let me get this straight. You let your sister pay for your education while actively hiding her from me? While acting like she wasn't good enough to be around my family?" Sophie opened her mouth, then shut it. James stood up. "I think we're done here, Sophie." Sophie's face crumpled. "James, wait." But he was already grabbing his coat. My parents sat frozen in horror. Sophie turned back to me, wild desperation in her eyes. Laura, please. I was stupid, okay? I messed up, but you can't just cut me off. What am I supposed to do? I shrugged. Maybe ask James's family for help. Oh, wait. I gestured toward the door where James had just walked out. Looks like you burned that bridge too. Sophie let out a choked sob. Helen looked at me, pleading. Laura, be reasonable. I am, I said. For the first time in years, I finally am. Then I turned and walked out, leaving them all to deal with the mess they'd created. As I stepped outside, the cold winter air hit my face, but for the first time in a long time, I felt warm. I wasn't the family's ATM anymore. I was free. It had been 2 weeks since I cut off Sophie's tuition payments. 2 weeks since I walked out of that family meeting and left them to pick up the pieces. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. I was at work, midway through replacing a client's broken water heater, when my phone buzzed relentlessly in my pocket. I ignored it at first. Figured it was another guilt trip message from Helen, or one of Sophie's desperate attempts to get me to change my mind. But when I finally checked my phone, my stomach dropped. Bank notification. Your business account has been temporarily frozen due to suspicious activity. I blinked. What? I quickly logged into my banking app. My jaw clenched as I scrolled through the transactions. $15. Withdrawn. $5,000 transferred. $3,500 gone. A cold wave of rage swept over me. I didn't recognize the receiving account. I called the bank immediately, my hands shaking as I paced in the client's basement. There's been unauthorized activity on my account, I said the moment the rep picked up. Actually, ma'am, the withdrawals were made with authorized credentials, the rep said. Whose credentials? She hesitated. It was done using a joint account holder's information. I froze. Joint account holder? Helen! That was when I remembered years ago, before I started my business. My parents had convinced me to open my first checking account with Helen listed as a secondary holder. I'd forgotten to remove her, and now she drained me. My blood went cold. I need to dispute these charges. I'm sorry, but since your mother was an authorized user, we cannot legally mark this as fraud. My vision blurred with fury. That's when my phone buzzed again. Sophie, I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I can't let you ruin my future over pride. I gripped my phone so tightly I thought I might break it. I barely heard the bank rep as she continued explaining procedures. I barely registered my surroundings because, in that moment, something inside me snapped the breaking point. I didn't text back. I didn't scream. I got in my truck and drove straight to my parents' house. The moment I stepped through the door, Helen had the audacity to smile. Laura, I was just about to call you. Now that you've calmed down, where is it? My voice was deadly quiet. She blinked. Where is what? Don't play dumb, I snapped, stepping forward. You stole from me. Sophie appeared in the hallway, her face pale but defiant. It wasn't stealing, she said, crossing her arms. It was reimbursement. I let out a hollow laugh. Reimbursement for what? For everything you took away from me, she exploded. I have 1 semester left. I had everything lined up, a job interview, a law firm internship, my future, and you just took it all away because of your stupid pride. My hands shook. My stupid pride? I repeated, voice trembling. You mean the pride of not wanting to be used? The pride of not being treated like a second-class citizen? Family helps family? Laura, Helen chimed in, as if that justified everything. I turned to her, disbelief coursing through me. You banned me from Christmas because I wasn't good enough for Sophie's new life. You let her walk all over me, take my money, humiliate me, and now you have the nerve to say, I should help her? Tom, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. It's just money, Laura, he said, shaking his head. You'll make more. Sophie's future is more important than a few thousand. I laughed, a dark, bitter sound. $38,000, I corrected. That's how much I've spent on her tuition. That's how much I invested into someone who sees me as nothing but a paycheck. And now, because I finally said no, you decided to rob me." Sophie crossed her arms. "You were going to cut me off anyway." Helen just made it official. That was it. That was the final nail in the coffin. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and held it up. "You want to talk about what's official?" I said, voice eerily calm. I tapped the screen and let the audio play. Sophie's eyes widened as her own text message rang out in the silent room. "I'm sorry it had to be this way, but I can't let you ruin my future over pride." Tom stiffened. Helen's face drained of color. Sophie's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I recorded this call with the bank too," I continued, "where they confirmed that you transferred my money into your account." Sophie's face crumpled. "Laura, and I sent it all to my lawyer." Silence. Dead, suffocating silence. Then Helen let out a nervous laugh. "You wouldn't actually take legal action against your own family." I met her eyes, unwavering. "Try me." Sophie started crying. "You're really going to do this to me?" "No," I said coldly. "You did this to yourself." I turned on my heel and walked out. I didn't stop when Helen started wailing. I didn't look back when Tom shouted my name. I didn't hesitate when Sophie sobbed, "Please," because for the first time in my life, I was done. They weren't my family anymore. They were just people who had run out of ways to use me. I expected the fallout to be bad. I underestimated just how bad. The moment I walked out of my parents' house, my phone exploded with calls, first Helen, then Tom, then Sophie. I ignored every single one. Then came the texts. "Helen, Laura, please don't do this. We're family. You'll regret this. Tom, you're being petty. Sophie just made a mistake. Sophie, please, you don't understand what this will do to me. I have nothing now." That last one almost made me pause. Almost. But then I remembered how she stood there in that living room, justifying what she did like it was her right to steal from me. So I blocked her. Then, for good measure, I blocked Helen and Tom too. It should have felt good, victorious even, but that first night alone in my apartment, I felt hollow. For years I had been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who fixed things. And now, for the first time, I had nothing left to fix. And that was terrifying. The war escalated. The next morning, I woke up to find my name dragged through the mud on Facebook. "Aunt Karen, I never thought Laura would turn on her own family like this. Imagine suing your own sister just because she made a mistake. Uncle Rob, some people let money change them. Sad. Helen, I raised my children to love and support each other. It breaks my heart that one of them forgot what family means." The comments were even worse. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years were taking sides, most of them against me. Sophie, of course, was playing the helpless victim. I never meant for things to go this far. I love my sister so much, and I just wish she'd see how much this is hurting all of us. Bullshit. I slammed my laptop shut, my stomach twisting with anger. It wasn't enough that they stole from me. They were trying to make me the villain. But the worst part? Not one person asked for my side of the story. Not one. That afternoon, as I was locking up the shop, my dad showed up. I considered ignoring him, but he pushed his way inside before I could shut the door. "This has gone far enough," he said, his voice tight. I crossed my arms. "No, Tom, it's gone exactly as far as it needed to." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, I get it. You're upset. But think about what you're doing. You're willing to destroy this family over money." That word money snapped something inside me. I stepped forward. "No, Tom. Sophie destroyed this family when she decided my money was more important than my presence. When you and Helen let her use me while treating me like an outsider. When you took from me without a second thought and then acted like I was the selfish one for fighting back." His face darkened. "You're being dramatic. You stole from me." I cut him off. "You and Helen. You knew exactly what you were doing." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. You're not sorry you took the money, I continued. You're just sorry I fought back. His silence was all the confirmation I needed. I exhaled, sharp and shaking. Get out, Tom. Laura, no. We're done. For the first time in my life, I saw real panic in his expression. Laura, we're your parents, and that used to mean something to me, I said, voice shaking. But not anymore. I held the door open. He stared at me, then let out a frustrated breath. You'll regret this one day. No, I said, meeting his eyes. I think for the first time I won't. He walked out without another word, and just like that, I was free. Moving forward, for weeks after, I kept expecting to feel regret, doubt, some lingering need to fix things. But instead, I felt lighter. I focused on my business, expanded, hired 2 more people, started taking bigger contracts. Jade, my best friend, and the only person who had my back through this, dragged me out to celebrate. You finally cut them off, she said over drinks. How does it feel? I took a sip of my beer, thinking. Like I've been holding up a house on my back, I said, and I finally put it down, she grinned. About damn time. One night, weeks later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Hello? A pause then, Laura? It was James, Sophie's ex. I sat up straighter. Yeah? He sighed. Look, I know we don't really know each other, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I had no idea what Sophie was doing to you. I blinked. She told me you cut her off for no reason, he continued. But after everything, I started digging. I talked to some people and I see the truth now. I swallowed. What happened to Sophie? He hesitated. She had to drop out. Couldn't get loans. She's working as a paralegal now, telling everyone she'll go back one day. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. I just wanted you to know, James added. Not everyone believed her lies. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Thanks, James. It took me years to learn the hardest truth. Family isn't about blood, it's about respect. And sometimes, walking away isn't losing, it's winning. Because the people who truly love you, they don't need to be bought. It's been a year since I walked out of my parents' house and cut them off for good 12 months of no-guilt trips, no last-minute tuition payments, no being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. And for the first time in my life, I'm truly free. After everything went down, I threw myself into my business. I expanded my plumbing company, hired more employees, and even upgraded to a bigger office. It turns out when you stop bleeding money into ungrateful people's pockets, you suddenly have a lot more to invest in your own success. And guess what? My business is thriving. Jade and I even started planning a well-deserved vacation Italy in the spring, something I never would have done before because I was always saving for Sophie's tuition instead of living my own life. Now, every single dollar I earn is mine. James wasn't lying. Sophie had to drop out with no money left, no loans approved, and no safety net. She took a paralegal job at some small firm, telling everyone she'd go back to law school one day. I won't lie, I thought I'd feel vindicated seeing her struggle, but mostly I just feel indifferent, because her problems aren't mine anymore. Helen and Tom tried reaching out a few times, but never to apologize, just to lecture me. Tom, family means forgiving each other, Laura. Helen, we miss you. Can't you just let it go? They never once said, we're sorry, so I never once answered. You know what's funny? Even though I walked away from my so-called family, my life is fuller than ever. I spent Christmas with Jade's family last year, and for the first time, I sat at a dinner table where no one judged me for my job. Jade's dad even shook my hand and said, "Damn good profession you're in, kid. Always going to be work for plumbers." And that simple sentence, it meant more to me than any of Helen's backhanded compliments ever did. I realized something that night. Blood doesn't make a family, respect does. Looking back, I don't regret a single thing, not cutting them off, not walking away, not choosing myself. Because the people who truly love you will never ask you to shrink yourself. to make them comfortable. They won't take from you. They won't hide you. They won't make you feel less than. Sophie made her choice, and I made mine. I chose me. And that's the best damn choice I've ever made.